I might throw just one or two questions at Steve to get us going, and then we'll throw it open. I'm guessing everybody's wondering about the negotiation process. I mean, how did you get in there? What sorts of understandings were there? And were there any hiccups along the way?
Yeah, there were hiccups. I'm wondering if they can bring the house lights up so we can see the audience too. Feels a little bit like we're performing here. Yes, I mean, I had the idea to do this series years ago when Judy and our kids were in school there, but I never thought it'd be possible to do it because I figured that the school would never allow us to come in and do a film or a series that tried to look candidly at why the district is failing in too many ways. And I was right. Did not want us in. But I found out from a teacher there named John Condi, who ended up being a producer on it. He saw me quoted in an article where I said I always wanted to do this but didn't think it possible, and he called me up and he said, I actually it's possible because the school board would make that decision, not the administration. I think that there are people on the school board who would be receptive to this. So that began a process that eventually resulted in the school board, over the objections of the principal and superintendent, much better, allowing us to go forward. So the administration was charged with cooperating, and they did for the most part. But there were certainly ways in which they tried to sort of rein us in. They tried to act as an intermediary between ourselves and teachers to a degree that at a certain point I had to push back on it because it felt like they were really trying to discourage teachers from participating. There were other ways and other things that came up, but for the most part there was pretty decent cooperation, except that the administration did not choose to participate, and that never changes from these episodes through the end. And we get back into that in the last episode. We sort of come back around to that and address it a little bit in the film about their lack of cooperation. But it's a huge school, so there were 4 of us out with cameras filming and following kids in classrooms, and so it was, we kind of also seized opportunities to get what we could get, and we weren't always under the eye of the administration when we were, traversing the school.
Yeah, well, leave it at that maybe. I kind of believe the richness of the material we just saw 20% of this series, or slightly less than. I kind of believe, though, you're not kicking yourself that you didn't have the administration sitting for interviews. I mean,
Oh yeah.
who wants to hear them when you have these incredible voices and faces and personality?
Well, I mean, I tried to convince the administration to participate so that we could sort of see what their days were like. I mean, we were really intending to make this as comprehensive a kind of examination of a single school in a community as we could. I mean, you've seen 7 kids introduced in the first 2 episodes. We eventually add another 5 along the way. So that we're ending up following 12 kids altogether, including white kids as well get added. And so, yes, we had our hands full with everything that we were trying to do, but it's a real shame that we didn't get a window into their feelings, thoughts, defenses, goals around these issues, because I think sometimes what people who refuse, this as a journalist, I think sometimes when people refuse to cooperate, they think that by their refusal to cooperate that they are somehow keeping themselves out of the film or out of the story. And that's not true. And I've made that clear to them. It's sort of like, you're in the film. We're showing up at public events and school board meetings and community meetings, and you're in it. It's just a question of, do you want your voice in it? But they chose not to.
Did you, in the actual allocating of resources to get the film done, did you have like a tiara production team and a Kendale production team, literally, so there were these relationships that were being.
Yes, glad you asked. So, yeah, so you see credited in the series that, I'm the director, and there's segment directors. There's 3 individuals, Kevin Shaw, Rebecca Parrish, and Bing Liu. I wanted to give them a different title, story director, but the Directors Guild of America, which I'm a member of, and this was done under, refused to allow that. It's boring and stupid, but they wouldn't do it. But so segment director was the closest we could get to it. But the way it worked is that we each divided up the kids. Like I had 3 kids that I followed, plus I spared everybody the school board meetings and things like that. I shot the boring stuff. Well, not really boring, but a lot of it was boring. But, and I followed other aspects of the story. But then, like Bing and Ken and Kevin and Rebecca each followed kids. And we started with 7 and added, so eventually we were all following 3 kids. And and it was a diverse team. Kevin is an African-American filmmaker. He follows, in what you've seen, he follows Kendale and Kashan. And then Gabe, who is that really interesting kid that's at the table, he eventually becomes a character later in the series. He followed Gabe as well. Bing is a phenomenal young filmmaker. He has a film that's playing here in the festival. I encourage you to come see it. He's not unfortunately able to come, so I'm an executive producer on it, so I'm gonna try and do a Q&A with you over.
That's tomorrow.
Tomorrow, Minding the Gap.
1:30.
What's the film?
Minding the Gap. It's a phenomenal film. I think I'm prejudiced, but I think it's the documentary of the year myself. But and then Rebecca. So anyway, Bing followed Charles and Grant, and then there's this wonderful senior that emerges in episode 3, Jada, who is like a Black Lives Matter activist, aspiring filmmaker, and she takes on people, including her physics professor, which is really an interesting story thread. And then Rebecca follows Shanti, and then 2 subjects that haven't shown up yet, Caroline, a white freshman, and Diane, a biracial white Mexican girl that shows up later. We're nothing if not ambitious, I think.
But you had the bodies to sort of cover them.
Oh, more than bodies. I mean, I purposely set out to hire filmmakers who were director shooters, because for economy's sake, but also for intimacy's sake. So, each of us were shooting our stories as well.
I'm far from the first person to bring this up, but there's the act of observing changes, that whole thing.
Right.
And so much a part of your work has run that risk, I guess. What have you learned, and how have you girded your work from that problem?
Well, I don't see it as a problem inherently. I think first of all, there's no way to know what the impact of cameras, to know conclusively what the impact of a camera has on a story, unless you believe in the alternative universe theory and we could somehow tap in to how their lives would have gone without us, right? So there's no way to completely know. But as filmmakers, we do know and have a sense of when the camera is having an effect. Sometimes it's a problem, and you have to work through it with your subjects to try to get them, a simple example would be, a lot of times at the beginning of a filming situation with a subject that you're following, they will feel, you picked them for this film or series, so I must be significant in some way, and I better live up to billing. You've picked me to be in this, and so there's a kind of effort that they make to be more than they are, because you think they're more than they are, right? And so you have to get them to relax and just be themselves and understand that that's a lot easier and really what you're after. And so there can be a process with that. But I found over the years, as I've done this more, there's a way in which the subjects being in film changes them and changes the situation that I completely am supportive of, which is being in a film makes you, as a subject, a person in the film, a focus of the film, reflect on your life. You can't help but do that, even if you don't interview them, even if you're just following them in a verite fashion solely, which I don't do, but people do. Even in those situations, it changes them, because they they know they're a subject of this film. They're living their lives and also examining their lives through this process. And I think that's actually a great thing. It can be therapeutic for subjects, and to the extent that it changes them during the course of the film, I'm like great with that, because as filmmakers, we know what we get from this experience. We get profound experiences of being able to put ourselves into people's lives and to understand things that we didn't understand, and try to bring that to people like you to understand. Subjects that the film goes well and it gets out there, they get a little bit of fame out of it, but the more meaningful thing, I think, often that they get out of it is this opportunity to think about their lives in a little bit different way that hopefully affects them in a positive way.
And probably provides a little story arc, because you're recording them becoming aware of their own lives.
Yeah, and I've had situations where subjects have kind of given a little speech in a scene that's not really directed at us, that's directed at someone else, right? So it's not to camera, but I know that speech would never have happened without the camera being there. But the speech is great, and the speech speaks to something deep within them of who they are and what they're going through, and so it's not a question of whether it's true or not. It's just a question of how do we come to learn it as filmmakers and viewers.
Well, it's time. Please throw your questions at Steve. Yes.
I would love to know a little bit more about the process you went through for picking which students would be main subjects.
Yeah, so everybody hear the question? Yeah. The process for picking main subjects. Well, when we started out, I knew that we wanted to follow kids who would span the grade levels and span the tracking levels within the school from, AP and honors level down to special ed. I knew that we would want different kind of family situations, both single parent, intact family situations, also unusual family situations in terms of, like, Kendall is being raised by his great aunt and great uncle, or Tiara and Terrence are living with Tiara's sister. I also wanted to make sure we had a strong representation of biracial students, because Oak Park, first of all, I think it's a ever-growing reality of life in America, but also in Oak Park in particular, it's a magnet for biracial families. It has something like 6 times the national average of biracial families there. And then eventually and I knew we wanted to get white students. That took a while. It took a while to get them, different story. But so we just went at it with those kind of parameters in mind, and then we started interviewing kids, and we interviewed about 40 kids and their families. The other piece of it is that families were going to be an important part of this, that this was not just going to be the kids' stories, but also the stories of them within a family. And out of those 40 initial interviews, I selected 12 that I then presented to the creative team, and out of those 12, we decided on 7 and divided them up with the understanding that we were going to pick up other kids as we went along.
Did you take any pointers from the spoken word teacher?
Did we take any pointers from the spoken word?
As far as recruiting.
Oh, well, so no, here's the thing. How these kids came to us. So she asked, did we take any pointers from the spoken word teacher in terms of recruiting? How these kids came to our attention was we put out the word in a variety of ways, but like the school made it clear to us that we could not directly ask teachers for their recommendations. They said there were legal reasons why that would be sharing, yeah, it's Oak Park. Legal reasons why that would be problematic. So all we could do was ask teachers to make recommendations to kids themselves that they thought would be good candidates to contact us, which was fine. It was a little inhibiting, but it was fine. And so there were a number of teachers, including Pete Kahn, who recommended students. And Charles, for example, was recommended by a number of teachers. They contacted him, and so and Pecan was one of them, and I'm pretty sure that Pecan spoke to Shanti, too, probably about it. In the back there? Oh, you pick them.
Yes, sir.
How has the administration, the teachers, and the students reacted to your end product?
Well, the students that are in the series have seen the series, and the response, first of all, our process is that we share their individual stories with them before it's done. Not to give them editorial control, but as part of the process of a kind of trust relationship with them, and this notion that I have of wanting to feel like we're making it with them, not on them so much. But again, with clear guidelines that we're not handing over editorial control. So we did that process quite a while ago, and out of that, I had a number of meetings with the families and the kids to talk through what was being shown, and some changes came about as a result of that. In some cases, very few, in other cases, more substantial changes. So that was a great process. By the time the kids and their families saw the entire series together, I've been very encouraged by their response. It's actually made them more happy to have been a part of it, because they feel now a kind of part of something much bigger than just their story, and it puts their stories in context that they couldn't grasp by just looking at their own stories. The administration has taken the position that while they oppose the making of the film, the series, they now want to use the series to engage in honest and candid conversations spread out over the entire 10 weeks that it will run. They're also taking the opportunity to say this, we filmed this in the 2015-2016 school year, that they have made real progress since then. I know that there's been effort since then. I think the jury is still out on exactly where the progress is, but I have to give them credit for this much. You know, they are trying to position themselves to their advantage to some degree, but they are saying to the community, there's hard stuff in this series and there's harder stuff to come. But, you know, we want to engage our community on this in an honest, candid conversation about both what's working here and what's not working. So, you know, they're at least not stonewalling at this point.
Carl?
Kendall, make weight?
I'm not going to tell you. You got to watch the series. Huh? You
You
got to watch. It's a great storyline, the Kendall wrestling storyline. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Well, it's two parts to the question. I just want to say I really loved the film. The two shows that we saw.
Thank
And,
you.
as a young person of color, I feel like I connected with these people as far as my high school experience and some of my college experience. And I feel like they remind me so much of my friends. And I love that. And,
That's great.
The question, well, I forgot the question. Oh, yes. So, do you see something like this series being used? I know it's about high school, but do you see it being used to help, like the racial disparities in colleges and like other institutions, higher education?
So if you didn't hear, the question was, do we see this series being used not just in high school, but addressing racial disparities in college education? That is an amazingly great question. I hope that would be the case, but I'm not sure that the focus of our impact and outreach campaign at this stage is thinking in that direction. But you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to email them after this and ask about that, and also see if, you know, there's a really great campaign, and if you go to now I've got to get there's AmericaToMe.com, which is the STARS website, but then there's America to Me talk something. Oh God, I should know this. I just anyway, there's another website. If you America to Me Talk to Me, I feel like is what it is. If you Google that in, you'll find it. But it's like America to Me Real Talk. I don't know, it's something like that. God, I can't believe I'm forgetting this. But you'll see that there is this sort of massive impact and outreach campaign that's been mounted by participant media, our partners who do that kind of thing with their work, which is great. And it involves 10 cities sort of devoted themselves to watching it weekly and having real conversations and pulling in people from each of those cities and with the idea of doing action steps and all that kind of stuff by the end of it. And then we are going around like on a little road show tour where like we'll show up for one of them, you know, kind of make sure they're doing it, I guess. And so it's a very exciting thing, but I'm gonna email our team about it because I think that's a great insight.
Any more questions? So before we break, just a quick, tonight, 7:15 at Town Hall Theater, Steve will be in conversation with Jay Craven after a screening of Abacus, his documentary that was nominated for an Oscar. And then tomorrow at 1:30, he and I will reconvene. We will be screening the Bing Lu film that Steve just mentioned, Minding the Gap, which is another youth-oriented.
Yeah, it's an incredible, you owe it yourself to see this film.
Yeah, so please add that to your calendars as you go off into the rest of the fest.
And if you just, I think you can, well, I don't know if you can just stay seated, but Barbara Koppel's film is showing right here next. So, you know, and Barbara is a legend in our field. So I encourage you to, you know, just make a day of it here at the Dana.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Alex.